Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'm Tom Boak, Chairman of the Kennebunkport Planning Board. This is a virtual planning board meeting. We're using the Zoom conferencing format. The agenda is on the town's website and along with information needed. If you wish to participate through Zoom, it's meeting number 913-2764-7680. You can also dial in by phone, 929-205-6099, and then give them that same 11-digit number with the number sign. If you happen to be conferencing and also watching this on cable channel, then please make sure you turn down your volume or mute something so that you don't get feedback. As always, we're on channel 1301 or on YouTube at Kennebunkport Television. During the meeting, only planning board members and the current participant will be selected by the board to be on screen. Other participants will be blacked out and audio muted, except when the board solicits public input. When we do ask for public input, you'll need to raise your hand your virtual hand in Zoom in order to be recognized. So right now I'm going to take a roll call. It appears as follows. We have Nina Perlmutter.
Here.
We have Ed Francis.
Here.
Larry Simmons. George.
Here.
There, and John Harcourt.
Here.
Here. So far, Scott has not signed in. So means if that's the case when we get to a vote, then I guess either George or John will get to vote and we'll alternate or something. Okay. So anyway, we will engage the applicants and his representatives will come forward. Then when there's a public hearing, we will again ask people to raise your hands. Once all input is received, we'll close the public hearing and invite board members to deliberate. We'll keep repeating that process. Now, the first order is to the minutes from the last meeting. So I think everybody's probably certainly gotten them by now. And there's Scott Mahoney coming in, so we have a full attendance. Welcome, Scott. Anyway, okay, so minutes. May I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Anyone seconding there? I'll second. Okay. So now I'll go through the board, and you guys will hopefully find your mute buttons at the appropriate moments. And so first off, I approve of the minutes.
I second.
Oh, thank you. Well, I think I seconded, but
Unmuted.
anyway. Okay, so I approve of them. Nina?
Approve.
Scott?
Approve.
Ed?
Approve.
Larry?
Approve.
George? Oh, and I don't need to say George, but
I'm surprised, but I approve.
it doesn't, I'm sorry. Okay, anyway. All right, that brings us to the first item on the agenda, item 200802, Kennebunkport Heritage Housing Trust number 2, Sebago Techniques authorized agent. This is the final subdivision review. It's the public hearing for approval of 4 lots consisting of two single family and 2 duplex units on Main Street without an E. So if I can have perhaps Steve Doe brought forward.
Yeah, if we could bring Ralph Austin, and if Pat Clancy's out there, that'd be great. Great, thank you. So I guess I'll pick up where we left off last. There was several questions from the board, and we've made several I'd call it supplementary submissions to the board. The first one was a letter from Pat Briggs addressing questions about the trust, how their operation is and all. There was a lease document that we provided. There's 2 documents there that we provided. And then one of the other items that the board had requested was that our cost estimate be sent out for peer review. That was sent out to Acorn Engineering, and Acorn has reviewed it, and we're going back and forth with them on some of the fine details of that, as far as quantities and unit prices. So that's still ongoing. Hopefully we'll have that resolved, if not this week, early next week. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. Ralph is also here to answer any questions, as well as Pat.
Okay, well, I'm going to, before we do anything with the public hearing, I'm going to, since I have made myself the Stuckey as case manager here, I've got a few questions I started to work through. I read the lease agreement and was quite, took a while, but the only thing I noticed that there was one kind of weird little thing that's kind of a joke. It's okay to have a dog, but no other animals. So I think cat lovers may be upset by your lease. Anyway, I'm sure that was accidental but anyway, there's no mention of the septic tanks and septic and such at all that I could find. Now, I'm sure that that we agreed before that there would be there were 2, let's see, there was a septic for each dwelling unit and a shared leaching field for the duplexes, I believe. That's correct.
Correct.
But
yeah, each unit has its own septic tank.
Yes. Yep. And what I didn't see was any mention of the septic tanks at all in the lease agreement. Isn't that something that they should be informed of, having to, that they're responsible for maintaining? Or is the trust going to be maintaining them?
This is Ralph Austin, representing the trust. Each homeowner would be responsible for maintaining the septic associated with their dwelling, and it would be a shared expense for the leach field for the duplexes. So we can add that in.
Yeah, it's something I noticed. I don't think, I mean, obviously it has nothing to do with our board, other than we like to see everything sorted out, but you
Sure.
can certainly get that added back in somewhere.
Yeah, we can add, there is kind of a generic, you're responsible for everything associated with the dwelling, but we can add in that specifically so there's no question down the road.
Good. Because that is under the ground, not on top of the ground.
That's true.
Yeah. Okay, the vacating the easement on the part of MDOT, where do we stand on that?
Again, I can respond to that. The state has officially removed its highway designation from the former location of Old Route 9. And the town, that's going to be handled by the selectmen at their meeting on October 22nd. Basically, it's called discontinuance by abandonment. And under state law, the selectmen have the authority, after holding a public hearing, to issue an order of, again, discontinuance by abandonment. And that they had hoped to do it tomorrow night's meeting, but based on the time frame for putting notices of the public hearing in the paper, it'll be set for October 22nd.
Okay, and at least 3 of us will be there.
And we can get all that paperwork submitted to the board once the selectmen complete their process.
Okay, no problem. I just didn't recall seeing anything much about it. The one thing I noticed in looking at the prints is that the shared driveway is entirely in Lot 1. Is that, since it's your land, I guess it probably doesn't matter. Is that correct, or what? Do they need easements, the two? Is there an easement, something required that that the person who's renting the land under the second unit has an easement to use that driveway?
I mean, Steve, is that correct that the driveway is all located within Lot 1?
Yes, it is. Yep.
Yeah, then we would just, I don't think anything technically needs to be done in that, but it's probably, again, better just to mention in the lease that, because again, they're leasing the house basically, but or they're owning the house and leasing the land. And they
Right.
take subject to whatever is there on the subdivision plan. But I think it would, again, same with the septic, probably be better just to mention in the lease so there's no question down the road.
Okay. Now, this is just to remind me of it. The utilities, like the electric and cable and such, those come off poles, or are they underground?
Correct. It's above ground.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, that's about it for my questions. Nina, do you have questions?
I just have a couple of comments. I noticed the dog bias in the writing as well. And having owned both dogs and cats and various other species of animals, I wondered why that was so, since cat ownership has surpassed dog ownership at this point in this country. So I think that ought to be changed.
It's safer for the birds, though.
Not if they don't let them out. I have 3 cats that stay in all the time. My birds are just fine. I'm wondering also if perhaps, I'm a little disappointed that there isn't more integration of environmental issues in the lease. And I'm wondering if you would consider having tag trees in there managed by the Shade Tree Committee.
I think the tag tree process is, very significant trees in town. This is a private road. I'm not sure the benefit of having tag trees on the property. There's really nothing along Main Street that I would consider to be a tag tree. So I don't know what the benefit would be for that.
I think the benefit would be is that it emphasizes the importance of trees, and keeping shade trees even on private road helps environmentally to cut heating and cooling costs. At a bare minimum.
I just look at some of the other subdivisions where they put trees in and they haven't been a tag tree. I think it's good to plant the trees. But once you start going in the tag trees, then you got to have the easements, and it gets pretty complicated. And
Well, it doesn't get very complicated. It's a one-page easement. And like I said, it emphasizes the importance. Other subdivisions, the land is not owned basically by a housing trust that's connected to the town. It's something, it's something I won't push or I won't insist on, but I think it's something you should think about.
Okay. I don't know if Pat, if you're that familiar with the tag tree process, you want to comment on it, or we can talk, later on that.
I am not, frankly, I'm not, Nina, but I think it is something we'd be happy to, we'd be happy to take a look at and consider going forward. We do intend to spend time with the homeowners who move in there and really have a kind of an ongoing process of, stewardship of the unbuilt on land there. So we do take that seriously. So certainly something we can look into.
Okay.
Yeah, these would be more on a street tree that we would probably put along the Griggs Way is what I think Nina's kind of leaning towards.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, no, I think that's an important question, to understand whether or not these are, existing trees that are, that are located on site, that are being considered, as opposed to trees that are proposed to be planted. I think that's an important distinction to understand. Also, I think it's important too for the trust to understand that, the shade tree easements, historically have been, to recognize a partnership between the property owner and the town in regards to maintenance of those trees. And that's been, that's, as I understand, that's been the primary purpose of the easement. The town requires the easement in order to be able to, maintain, or expend shade tree committee funds for the maintenance, and upkeep of these trees. That's my recollection in terms of what the purposes of those, of what those easements are.
That's correct.
Yeah. Werner, does it cover both existing and newly planted?
It can, it's I would say that when the program was started, it was existing trees, and over the years it has come to include trees that have been replaced, whenever significant trees were removed, for some reason or another. So it's been both.
Yeah, it doesn't require an easement if it's on town right of way, but as this is going to be a private right of way, it would require an easement.
Correct.
Yeah, and these, there's really the way the road's aligned, the trees would have to be on the actual lots because the road is shifted to the lots so that you got the roadway and a sidewalk, and then you got the property line. So these would have to be, the way I see it would be new trees planted and on the lots, because there's really no existing trees that I would consider a taggable tree of significance there.
Right. Well, it doesn't make any difference if it's a private right of way or on the lot. So there's no town right of way there.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Scott, do you have anything?
Yes, I would just, is there an HOA in this?
It really is the lease.
Yes.
Okay. Because instead of, I think, in the subject just discussed, instead of, removing some of the rights, I would think that perhaps in the lease that you put in that provisions for a request for any kind of tree cutting or et cetera to the owner.
I was going to ask that same thing. That's a very good point.
Thank you.
So if I follow, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Yeah, Scott, just so I followed that, in the lease, you want to see something that before the trust, or I guess the town, if there was this tag tree situation, would have to either notify the homeowner or get their permission. I wasn't sure I followed.
Sure. So I would say for the benefit of ownership or the leasee, but yet to be compliant with environmentally being responsible, I would say instead of the tree, that something be in writing that a review had to be done of any trees that had to be cut, that they wanted to cut down.
Mhm.
And they being the leasee.
Okay,
So basically that the trust would have the right of review and approval not unreasonably withheld for any tree cutting that a homeowner proposed to do on their lot.
Yes, and which would
got it.
take the responsibility away from the tree people and give a responsibility similar to that entity. That's right.
Yeah,
Okay,
I think that makes a lot of sense, actually.
yeah.
Okay, so Ed, have anything? At this point?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. I have two questions related to the discussions that have been going on. Just a follow-up on the tree issue, just to illustrate. There's a windstorm comes through and a tree comes down. That happens to me if the tree is on my property. Doesn't matter where, then I have to go clear it. I'm the owner of that property. How would you envision allocating that responsibility, and how would you, in this situation?
Ralph, you want to speak to that?
I would see it as the homeowner's responsibility.
That's fine. I just wanted,
Yep.
because it wasn't clear to me, I just wanted to raise the issue. And along with that is there's a spring cleanup, and a fall cleanup, and sometimes you lose branches and all of that. So that responsibility for the land, even though you don't own it, maybe just needs to be laid out clearly, however you want it.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was my thought. And related issue, we talked about driveways, and when it was said that it's all on lot one, I thought, well, who's responsible for clearing the snow from that driveway, and how are those costs going to be covered? How do you envision that happening?
Those would be shared for the driveway. Those would be shared between lot one and lot two. So there are 3 homes there. So those 3 homeowners would share that cost. There will be something for the well, let's see. So for lot 3 and 4, similarly, it would be shared by 3 and 4. So we wouldn't put both together and have 1, 2, 3, and 4, each pay a quarter. We would really separate into the upper 2 lots and the lower 2 lots. Obviously the longer, the longer private roadway is in the lower 2 lots, and that would be a bigger cost, obviously.
In our HOA for my little street here, the responsibility for contracting with someone to do that plowing falls to whoever's got that, whoever's lucky enough to be in that position in the year that's been elected to do that. Do you see that someone in the trust would do that? Or again, is that a responsibility that needs to be sort of like a mini HOA or?
Yeah, I think our objective is to work with the homeowners, enable them to take as much responsibility as they're comfortable taking, and support them in doing that in whatever ways they may need.
All right, yeah. So there's kind of going to be a de facto manager who's the point of contact for the homeowners
Yes.
at the trust, and that position, somebody will have that hat.
Yep.
At any point in time. Thank you. That's all I had.
Okay, Ed, let's see, Larry.
I just want to express my appreciation for the spirit of cooperation exhibited by the Kennebunkport Heritage Housing Trust in responding in a timely manner to our questions. I really appreciate that, and look forward to maintaining those good relationships. And I did appreciate getting the letter signed by Pat Briggs, and then of course those lease documents. And then I'm glad to hear that the cost estimates being reviewed. Look forward to seeing that if that can be shared with us. Anyway, I also read the document, the lease agreement, and the, whatever they call it here, ownership covenants. And so one question that came to mind was the issue about the rights of the house owner to use his property as a VRBO or an Airbnb. Is that something that needs to be addressed now, or are we just going to wait for some town edict to come out? I mean, what's the situation on that?
Ralph, you want to speak to that?
Well, I'm skimming the protective covenant right now, because I can't remember everything we put in there.
Well, my remembrance of the substantive discussion while Ralph is looking for the language is that we really, I mean, ultimately, I think our thought was that if the town adopted a policy that was permissive, we may need to allow that, but that generally our view was not to require basically that these be used 12 months by the home buyer as their, the place that they occupy, and that it not be a place used for rental income. We may have put in some de minimis allowance there. Any luck in finding that, Ralph?
No, it's not in the protective covenants, but I know in the lease itself, it talks about 12-month occupancy, and I just need to find that. And if I can't find it tonight, I can send an email to Warner to send to the board with that information, but I'll keep looking.
My only thought on the VRBO question, the only thing that could be done under current ordinance would be if somebody is there and wants to rent out the second bedroom, but we're trying to rent to families, and it seems unlikely that somebody's going to rent out the second bedroom. But if they were, they would have to go before the zoning board of appeals to get that approved. So.
Okay.
Right.
So I just wondered whether there needed to be any more in the lease agreement about that issue, and it sounds like it's probably covered. So then the other question that came to mind was I didn't see any specific assessment of risk, and so the inference is that this is sort of a risk-free situation. So if that's the perception, I guess that's okay.
I'm not sure what you mean, Larry, in terms of who's free of what risks.
Well, this is a subdivision that's part of a larger project. And so I just wondered whether any assessment of risks has needed to be made. I mean, there's financial risks, and I think you have some issues you have some comments in the lease agreement about default, that kind of thing. So that's probably covered. But I don't know, is there any other risks, maybe fire hazards, or I don't know, maybe the possibility of an accident from trucks speeding by on the roadway there, because I know at least a couple of the houses are quite close to the roadway. I mean, these are some of the issues that come to mind that's sort of in the general category of risk, and whether or not you want to address them now or just see what happens.
The trust is going to
homeowners would be required to have insurance by the mortgage lender, that would cover, I think, most of the things in terms of our work on getting the homes constructed and kind of taking responsibility for that before they're sold to the home buyers. We will obviously have a budget that we'll have to manage. We'll have some contingencies built in. We'll carry insurance, as we go through. We'll have bonded contractors, and we'll look to manage that set of risks that way.
Yeah, okay. Great, thank you.
Okay, George, do you have any?
Tom, quick follow-up there. Just again, looking at the HOA model, Pat, our subdivision carries a small liability contract for things that might happen on the common land, including the private way and all. So my thought would be that would be the type of thing that the trust would pick up.
It's the kind of thing we would work with the homeowners to make sure was in place. But I think, again, what we're looking to do is to really have these homeowners on their own bottom, if you will, so that kind of a cost, which really is related to the cost of the 6 homes, would be a shared cost.
Just like it would be in an HOA.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, but in an HOA, if we had common land, that would be the HOA's responsibility to carry the aforementioned liability insurance. It doesn't cost much, but it's a good thing to have.
Oh, but it
Yeah,
would be a
I'll be
shared
talking
cost.
I'll be talking to the trust about that. They probably should have as Tom said, a minimum liability insurance policy overall because they are the landowner. But that gets then assessed back to the homeowners as part of common assessments.
Sure.
Like in a homeowners association, the insurance that the owners association has is a cost that's reflected in the assessments to each owner.
Absolutely. Okay. So I was just getting down to George.
I'm very interested in the maintenance questions. Most of I got answers to all of them, I think, except Ed had mentioned, and I saw Ralph nodding his head. I wanted to follow up on this idea because it wasn't clear. Is it there will be a manager appointed, or the trust will act as a manager for these items?
My understanding, and Pat can speak to that, is that the trust will act as a manager, but will have a person, either volunteer or staff person, who would be the contact manager. Is that
Okay.
right, Pat?
Yeah, and again, I think in the early days, this would be, we laid out kind of the committee structure, I think, in the letter Pat Briggs sent. This would be the administrative committee that would be spearheading this. And so it would probably be the chair of that committee that would be the kind of the point of contact. As there's more housing done by the trust, and it gets to a point where maybe there's a permanent kind of, maybe part-time or full-time, kind of staff person. That person might assume those duties across a larger inventory of homes over time.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That helps.
Okay, and John, have anything?
No, nothing.
Okay, so we have gotten through the board. I think it's time to open up the public hearing. So if anyone would like to be heard from the public, would please raise your hand in Zoom and you'll be recognized. Okay, well, let me, my thoughts are that you guys are going to come back next time with some final answers to questions, is what I understand. So perhaps what we need to do is continue the public hearing to next time, and then, because we got in trouble once for closing the public hearing before, and then you sent us something new and we had to go through all sorts of machinations. So I would ask for a motion to continue the public hearing to the 21st.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, So I'm in favor. Nina,
In favor.
Scott,
In favor.
Ed,
In favor.
Larry.
In favor.
Okay. So, thank you, guys. I think we'll, with a few things, I mean, I've been writing the finding of facts, and which is why I came up with a bunch of questions. So it sounds like next time you're gonna have the last little things, and maybe the acorn stuff will be complete, so we will have seen that. And so we'll see you next time. Except for you.
Thank you.
Except for you, Steve, though, who might as well hang around.
And Ralph.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. So I guess, well, I guess you can temporarily demote Steve and Ralph and bring them back for item number 3.
Correct.
Item number 2 is 200803 Robert Williamson Atlantic Environmental LLC site plan review for approval to do maintenance of a bulkhead. So is our presenter on that around?
Is Mr. Forrester?
Yeah. Thank you.
Mr. T. Yes, I like that.
There he is.
Great. Good evening, everyone.
Okay, so this is your, the public hearing for your stuff. So if you could just give a brief description in case there's any public watching. And,
Absolutely. So
okay.
good evening.
Don't
Tim
be a long one.
My name is Tim Forrester with Atlantic Environmental, here on behalf of 47 Ocean Avenue and Robert Williamson. Mr. Williamson owns the bulkhead that surrounds the riverbank condominiums. And over time, there's been some failure to that bulkhead. So what we're looking to do is simply a repair and maintenance and to beef up the wall a little bit. The proposed plan is to install some pressure treated timbers to sister up along the ones that are there now, and then essentially band that whole thing with a whaler that ties the whole unit together. And then to put riprap, crushed stone, not crushed stone, but riprap, which is large angular block rock, 18 to 30 inches in diameter, up against the wall. And we'll also add some filter fabric in behind there before we place the stone. Essentially, over time, some of those timbers have snapped. The crushed stone that's up on top has leached down through. And that's what we're looking to do, is just basically preserve what's there now and beef it up to stand the test of time.
Okay. Does anybody from the board have any questions on this one? Like,
I do, Tom.
I figured you might. Go.
Okay.
Yes, please.
Yeah, so hi, Tim. I've gone over the package as the assigned case manager, so I had a few questions that maybe were a little detailed and didn't come out in the briefing, at least to me. Can you give me any insight as to why there are 2 deeds in the application, one a warranty deed and then a subsequent quitclaim? I tried to get through them, but they're very dense material.
To be honest, I have not looked at the deeds in quite some time. This was submitted first to the DEP, and then once I go through that process, then I come before the town. So I honestly haven't looked at the deeds in a long time. Typically, our objective is to, when we submit deeds, it's to show that the applicant has rights to the intertidal zone. I'm guessing that his first deed is just a reference deed, and the second one may have that actual language in it. which is typically why we would submit 2 deeds.
Yeah,
That's
I'm
my
not sure
first
that
assumption.
that's the explanation, but they definitely establish his right to bring this application. And I think that's all we're looking for. It really
Yeah.
was a curiosity on my part.
Yeah, my coworker Lisa Vickers typically does the deed research on
Yeah.
these.
I don't think there's anything untoward. I really just
Yeah.
like to learn something as we go through this process. Second question.
Yes.
You say the whaler is also pressure treated. What dimension? Is that also an 8x8 timber?
No, that'll be a little bit bigger. It's probably going to be a 10 by 10.
And maybe pieced.
Yeah, you'll splice in longer sections. Yeah.
All right. Do you know what are these timbers treated with? There must be some approved pressure treated timber for this use, and I didn't see any reference to that in the package.
There's 2 standards for pressure treated lumber that are commonly acquired.
Yeah.
And then one is essentially the version that you can get at a Home Depot, and the second is a marine grade. You can tell when you see them. The marine grade one is a heavier, darker green, more than your standard PT, which is more of a yellow color. The more dense pressure treated we're not going to use on this. So it's typically if something is in submerged applications, your piles that are used on the, like a mooring dolphin, would be those. And I do not know the exact chemicals that are in them now. They used to be an arsenic based, but they're not arsenic anymore. So I can certainly get it for you. I've looked it up several times in the past. I just don't recall it off the top of my head.
I'd appreciate that. I'd like to refer to it in the findings as I write them.
Yep.
Even the nomenclature, you said marine grade 1. If that's what you're using, then just tell me that, and
Okay.
that'll be great. Another sort of point of clarification. The width of the lot in the application says that it's 190 feet. Now, I know that what we're talking about really is the deed is to the bulkhead. And yet that's referred to as 189 feet. We're only talking about a foot here, but why are there 2? Where's the 1 foot going?
It should be listed as 189 feet. Where did we say 190, or did we say approximately 190?
On the application page of the one that's Exhibit 1, says subject property location 47 Ocean Ave, lot width 190 feet, area 2850 square feet, because it's 15-foot right away.
Yep.
And then later on, we go down to say in item 11 that it's 189 feet bulkhead. So I couldn't figure out if in fact the deed is to the bulkhead, what's the 100, what's the 90, and what's the 189, and why are we making that distinction?
They should be one and the same, because the timber wall runs from bulkhead to cement wall on the opposite side.
So I'm gonna believe that this is 189 foot structure.
That's what I would indicate it as.
Okay.
We say lot width plus or minus 190 feet.
Understood. Yeah.
We were not anticipating that to be an issue. So.
That sounds good. That's what I was looking for.
Okay.
Read my own notes here. Next question. We talk about at the end of construction, well, actually at the end of each day, but at the end of the construction, you're going to stabilize. You're going to stabilize at the end of each day, and at the end of the construction, you're going to stabilize the easement area, including certain areas of the easement where cloth is going to be installed in gravel. Can you give me some insight as to why it's not the entire easement? Why is it certain portions, and what's going on there? What do you envision?
Well, yeah, so easement area is wider than the depth along the surface of the crushed stone. So as you travel from the bulkhead in over that 15-foot period, you have a section of crushed stone followed by a section of lawn area. So areas that are disturbed, including the lawn areas, will be reseeded, revegetated, and stabilized. And the other areas will be returned to existing conditions. So that's where the filter fabric and the crushed stone comes back in.
I see. So areas that are now gravel will be restored to gravel. That
Correct.
will probably include adding filter fabric as required.
Yep.
And the areas that are grass now will be reseeded and aerated if they've been compacted. Is that?
Yeah, the goal is to return it to the conditions that you see today along the top of the bulkhead.
Okay. And that'll take a little bit of care and feeding after the end of the project.
It will, and it'll end up being stabilized for the winter with really the crushed stone areas will be secured, but then the adjacent lawn areas, those will essentially be covered with a heavy layer of hay, and then because it'll be wintertime construction and then reseeded in the spring.
So there's no sprinkler system there, is there, on that lawn?
Not that I know of, no.
Okay, all right. You answered in an email today one of my questions, which is you think this is a month-long project, three or 4 weeks. And do you envision all of the work being done during the daylight hours?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And in the write-up for this, there's always a question about noise. Do you envision this?
I think the loudest noises you're going to hear are probably just when a dump truck comes and offloads some stone, and then you'll have a typical, excavator moving back and forth.
You're not driving these piles; you're just going to sister.
Yeah, yeah. They'll use the end of the excavator to push them down.
Yeah.
But not being pile driven.
Not a steam-driven pile.
Correct.
Or anything like that. All right, that's what I had, with the exception of the letter. I know you gave us some email, but to address the abutters letter, I didn't know if you wanted to just take the opportunity to hit those 3 questions that Ms. McConnell sent.
Yep. So I did receive the email from which Lisa forwarded to us and to the board from Helen McConnell, 49 Ocean Avenue, who's the abutter to the south. She had 3 questions. One was, when will this work start? And of course, after receiving approvals, our desire would be to start it in the winter. So, January would be a perfect time to start this. We actually prefer to do these coastal jobs in the winter when ground is more frozen. There's a lot less disturbance. Plus, there's not as many people around, so traffic isn't so much of an issue. And then the next question was, once it begins, how long will the project take? We anticipate 3 to 4 weeks from start to finish, and then coming back in the spring to reseed and make sure that everything is stabilized. And the last is, at the corner where my cement bulkhead meets Mr. Williams' existing wall on his property, there is a mature bush that is growing over my cement bulkhead. I would like to request that he have this trimmed back as soon as possible before winter sets in. And yes, we'd be happy to take care of that. I did speak with Mr. Williamson about those points today.
Any chance that bush will be a victim of the construction?
If you were to look, assuming it's the same bush, on page 26 in the application packet, there is a picture of it. It appears to me to be just an overhanging creeping juniper. And I think it can easily just be trimmed back, and all the work will occur in front of it. So I anticipate no damage to the root structures.
Terrific. Thank you. That's all I had, Tom.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else have comments or questions?
I do.
Oh, okay. Scott,
Go ahead,
good.
Scott.
No, Scott's fine. Go.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you for answering that with the abutter. That was, super appreciate that. So a question. What is the estimated life of what you're going to create? How long will that be good for? And I ask that because, and you're an engineer, I'm not, I find it kind of surprising that wood is involved at all in it.
So one point of clarification, I am not an engineer, so I'm a wetland scientist. But we did work with Scotty Linscott from HB Fleming, who is an engineer, on the design of this. And timber walls like this, there's no reason why it shouldn't stand for 20 or 30 years without any question.
Right, but wouldn't just granite blocks or granite large stones, like you said, be 100-year structures?
And that's why we put that in there as well. What we didn't want to do was tear apart the entire wall in order to put in just granite. For one, I mean, a blocked granite wall is rather expensive and time consuming to build. And we're also trying not to completely disassemble what's there. The fill material in behind that is somewhat unknown. So our objective was to, brace up and beef what's there, and Scotty's design is that will suffice.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that is Scott.
Yes, thanks so much.
Okay. You have anything, Larry?
I did, yep. So I just wanted to follow up on our last meeting. So, Tim, were you able to confirm that your 1 foot excavation depth for the footing is sufficient for this wall?
Yeah, that's how we do it for all of these. The material underneath there is, it's set to be half the diameter of the stone that you're putting in place. We didn't do any borings in there, but you can see that there's a mix of other cobble boulder, outside of the wall area, as well as the crushed stone that's in there. In none of our projects have I ever had the rock disappear or compact and go out of sight. So it's always worked for us in the past.
Okay, so you have some history that's sufficient. Okay, so then in a related question, are your drawings going to be stamped, engineering stamped?
I didn't notice a requirement of that, but I can absolutely have that done.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yep.
And then the last thing was the drawings. You were going to add the actual numerical numbers for the elevations of your various water, your high waters.
Yep.
Were you able to do that?
We did do that. I thought plans were emailed to Lisa.
Okay, I'll catch up with it then. All right, thank you.
Yeah.
That's all I got. Thank you
Okay.
very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Nina, do you have anything?
No,
Okay. George?
I do not.
John?
No,
Okay.
well,
So,
I would make one comment for Ed. If he's curious about the deeds, but if he looks at the second one, he'll find that there's a bank involved, which is probably required that second deed because there was a mortgage added to the property.
thanks, Nina.
all right.
Thanks, Nina.
Now, I think we're going to open up a public hearing, and we had a letter from Amy, our town attorney, that said that in general, we don't have to always do 2 public hearings, but it sounded to me like Ed is still looking for a few things, so we might still want to have a second public hearing.
Tom, I'm not looking for anything else.
Oh, okay. Well, okay, I'm going to, the question will be okay, I think, I bet there isn't any public out there, but I will open up the public hearing at this point. So, do we have anybody raising hands? Okay.
I do see, Tom, that Ms. McConnell, who wrote the letter, the email, which we just addressed, is in attendance, but I think we've covered her
We
concerns.
covered her questions, so if she wishes to be heard, we'd love to hear from her, but if not, we don't need to. Okay, well, I'm going to, at this point, suggest we close the public hearing and vote on this application, and then next time you can read the FOF, Ed. So I'll take a motion.
I would move that this application be approved.
Second.
I'll second.
Please, Tom, I have to vote.
Pardon me? Okay, so we're going,
I'm sorry.
okay, so I'm going to go through the usual asking for people to vote. So I vote approve. Nina,
Approve.
Scott,
Approve.
Ed,
Approve.
Larry.
Approve.
Okay, so this is approved. We will read the finding of facts at the next meeting. And then we'll sign them off and you can pick them up in town hall a couple days after the next meeting.
Very good.
Okay,
All right. Thank you very much.
so that means we can demote Tim Forrester and we can bring back Steve and Ralph. Thank you, Mr. Forrester. Okay, while that's happening, this is item 200901, Earth Restaurant, Sebago Techniques Authorized Agent. The site plan review. This is the initial review. This is not going to be, this is not a public hearing. This is just discussions among the board members. This is for approval to change the use of the restaurant from seasonal to year-round. And that's at the Earth Restaurant. So I guess it's up to my friend Steve again to start the presentation.
Can you hear me?
I can.
All right, I think I got bad connection or something, so sorry about that. I had to cut out for a minute. Just trying to get myself organized here. So we're looking to convert or change the Earth Restaurant from what is a seasonal use to a year-round use. The original approval for this project had a seasonal use for the whole complex. And it was a kind of a marketing decision that the developer had. Typically, resorts in town are kind of seasonal. Once after Columbus Day comes by, they typically close down, guests leave. In the past few years, they've noticed that's changing. More people are staying around. And so they'd like to basically open up the Earth Restaurant for a year-round use. The original project, when they built it, it was intended to be seasonal. So water lines, sewer lines were all pretty shallow, which minimized ledge removal. Earth Restaurant was no different. The lines were installed fairly shallow. Same with some of the septic system lines. So to make it year round, they have to upgrade and basically bury the lines deeper and insulate in certain locations. So that's something they would like to do, provided the board will allow this. There's nothing in the ordinance that prohibits this from being a year round. So I guess it's really just, there's nothing changing to the site other than utility lines get dropped deeper. So I guess I'd happy to answer any questions. I did see there was some letters from butters. I can go through those when it's appropriate. Unless Ralph wants to add anything to the presentation.
Ralph, you're muted.
I should know better by now. Thank you. Sorry. It's as simple as Steve said, that it was a marketing decision made by the developer years ago when it started, that everything should be seasonal. Noticing more and more people staying longer, January and beyond. They want to keep the restaurant open year round. But if I'm correct, Steve, it's not any of the cottages, it's just the restaurant.
Just the restaurant, correct.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. Oh, damn it. Okay, so I guess the bulk of the questions are in at least in these two letters, kind of. So I guess I would like to hear discussion of some of those things. Certainly, the parking parking was already problematic. You were like shuttling people up from parked along the roads. And the question
Correct.
of
Could I interrupt just for a second before we get into the details? Maybe this is a question, Werner, I need your help with, but I'm not finding a seasonal use for restaurants. It seems to me that the use of a restaurant is a use for the free enterprise zone. It's conditional, I believe. Why is this before the board?
Correct. No, that's a great question. And, the reason why this has come before the board is because, when you look back at previous sets of findings and previous applications, the restaurant, and the site overall had always been identified as a seasonal use. And so it's merely because of the change in the change in the status, of the property, arguably a status that was, that the developer placed upon themselves whenever this, whenever these phases were permitted and presented, before the planning board in the past. But to answer your question, the restaurant use is a conditional use within the free enterprise zone, and so absent any specific modifications that were made during the planning board process, it's my understanding there are some there are elements on site that that are seasonal in nature, but those were done at the choice of the property owner, and should they get approval for a year-round operation, then there'll be some site changes that need to be made in order for the restaurant to operate on a year-round basis.
So if I think I understand you. Let me phrase it back to you, play it back to you. The board, this is before the board so that we can look at this and decide, was there an implied condition when we approved this conditional use of a restaurant that it be seasonal? And if there was, then then we need to go look at that carefully. But if there wasn't, then probably we're all good. Does that sound right?
Yeah, I mean, you have findings that specifically, identified as seasonal.
And as a requirement.
Well, it's a good question. It wasn't as a requirement. I think it was done because that's how the application was presented.
But it was approved under those circumstances.
Correct.
Right.
Yes.
I understand.
It was approved with that understanding, that it was seasonal. And so, I requested that this come back in front of the board primarily because it was initially presented as seasonal, and, the findings that were developed at the time, reflected that.
Right. So we get a fresh look and say, if we'd been clear that this was not going to be seasonal, it'll be year round before, what if we had a problem with it? And that sounds good to me. We should look at it in that light, in my opinion. Thank you.
Tom, before
Yes.
we go into those letters, I'd like to point out that this application states that it's a permitted use, and it is not a permitted use. It is a conditional use in the free enterprise zone. And I think that comes into play.
Well, that's why we're looking at it even the first time, right? This wasn't
That's right.
it's not resource protected, it's not shoreland, it's a conditional use is why this
Right.
ever came to the planning board.
That's correct. That's why it's in front of the planning board, because it's identified in the conditional use table.
So that's something that should be fixed.
Yes,
Yes,
they noted
correct.
that.
Tom, I have a specific question on the
Good.
application.
Yes.
Steve, I thought your letter said that all you're going to do is bury the pipes and insulate the pipes. But on the application, it says that the percentage of lot occupied by structures is going to increase. What structures are involved that increases it from 2.6% to 3%?
Let me look at that. There shouldn't be any increase. My guess is my cut and paste from the previous application with the tree houses is what that was, but that's an error and good catch on that. There is no increase in lot coverage.
Thank you.
I will make that correction.
And then I have a question for Werner. In the multiple FOFs that are included in the application, there are a bunch of conditions, most of which have to do with the septics and wells. And they require that the applicant take certain actions like test the septic systems and the abutters wells, et cetera. Have they complied with that, and do you have evidence of that? Of all of those
Yes.
conditions?
Yes, they've complied with that. I receive, on an annual basis, I receive reporting. I think it's from was it Sweet and Associates does a water testing, does the well testing, out there, for the abutters wells, and so I do get copies of those reports.
Thanks.
I believe
No,
that.
I just wanted to make sure that they had complied.
Sure. Yep.
Werner, do any of those reports indicate the amount of water running through those wells or the septic systems? Is there any kind of measurement there? Like, are the wells changing?
So my you'll have to give me a little bit of grace because I'm shooting from memory here, but my understanding is that the requirement to look at the wells, are specific to phase one, which isn't this particular piece. If you recall, we're in phase two of Hidden Pond. But to answer your question, what we typically see for these, within the reports, it's a nitrate. We're looking for nitrates. So there's a couple of monitoring wells, that are located, just on the other side of the septic systems that are in phase one. And what we get is we get reports, that tell us, what the nitrate levels are in those monitoring wells, and whether or not they've meet or exceed the standards that were set. And to date, those monitoring wells, the nitrate levels they've remained well below any of the standards of concern.
Okay.
I believe there was also something about the water, the drinking water well of one of the abutters that
Yes.
that would be affected by the maneuvering of wells.
That's
Correct. Again, that was so you would be remembering this from phase one, which is where there were if you recall, in phase one there had been I forget the exact number of cottages that had been previously approved, and they did some relocation of those cottages in the first phase. And so those conditions are specific, were specific to dealing with that development there. Again, the restaurant here is in the second phase.
Okay.
Well, I have a concern here about the overall progress this project has gone through, and that I see 9 different FOFs here, and it seems like every time they come back, they're increasing something or changing something that increases the use. And now we're going to have an increase in the use of the restaurant over seasons. And my immediate thought is, well, those cottages are only supposed to go from May to October. And are we going to start changing conditional use and make them year-round cottages, which is going to basically put pressure on the wells and the septic systems as well. We just went through one of the worst droughts, or we're still going through one of the worst droughts I've ever seen in Kennebunkport. And I know people who have stopped watering their lawns and everything because they're afraid their wells are going to run dry. And we've been through this before. And the prognosis for Kennebunkport is it's going to get warmer and drier. And that probably means through the winter months too. There was an article in the New York Times, I think it was, about how the whole East Coast is starting to lose trees because of the warmer and drier seasons that we're having. So I just wonder where this is going to end up. If you start with the restaurant and you start making it year round, I expect by next year, or even before that, we'll start seeing something in front of us that says they're going to make the cottages year round. I want to know what the plans are for the future. This is a conditional use. There are a lot of people living around this development, and they have some concerns for their wells, and they concerns for the septic systems as well. So it may not be exactly what we're supposed to look at in this particular application, but I think in terms of it being conditional use, we have to take a look at that.
I can address
It
that.
moves on, just to add on what Nina's saying, if it continues to creep in that direction, it stops being cottages for rent and becomes a development. It becomes a subdivision. It becomes a housing development with school buses and everything else that goes along with it.
Yeah.
Can I address that?
Please.
Yes.
Thank you. Right now, there are no plans for the cottages to become year-round. There are a number of different findings of fact because over time, almost any business changes. There are a number of several hotels that are before you at different times because they're making changes. We have to come before you for this particular change. They want to make the restaurant year-round. That's why we're here. If they want to make the cottages year-round, we need to come back and convince you that that's okay. But at this point, they don't have any of those plans, and it can't creep. It can't become a year-round housing development. It is approved as a hotel or motel. And if there's any change to that, we have to come back to this board. So I guess I understand your concerns, but anything we do, we need to come back here. And right now, we're simply here to have the restaurant be year-round.
No, I understand what the application entails and that it is limited to the restaurant. And I see other hotels too, like the Colony, expanding to a year-round sort of condition. But this place, when it was started, was a very different situation. It wasn't even a motel. It was like a subdivision.
Yeah,
Rental.
I was there when it started. It was a housing development, and the market for housing went south at that time, and the developer found he could do better renting it, and then decided, well, why don't I just, instead of renting houses, turn it into a hospitality business, a motel, and this board approved it.
And so he can come right before the board again and say, I now want it to be a housing development because the market's up again.
It's not really set up that way, but even if he did, and you found it wasn't appropriate, you would say no. I mean, I don't think you're a rubber stamp that when somebody comes here, you just say, sure. You know how diligent this board is, and you review all aspects of it. But you can't say to an applicant, we'll approve this, but we don't want you coming back ever again with anything.
That's true. That's true. I'm just concerned that it does continue to creep. And you have to look at the burden on the neighborhood as well, as it does.
And you
So
will each
I'm-
time. Yeah.
I'm willing to look at this application in its entirety and its limitations, and ensure that the septic systems and the wells are fine. But, I think the board has to keep in mind with a conditional use, because it's not a permitted use, it's conditional, how it fits into the neighborhood over time.
I don't disagree. And the board has the regulations and the land use ordinance to review. And if this meets those criteria, then it should be approved.
Okay, do you have any other questions, Nina?
Well, I think we should go into the content of the letters and check out what they're saying about the parking and the septic systems and everything. I think that is a part of this application and that we have to look at.
Yeah. Okay, before.
I can-
So, I
You
guess.
want me to get into that now, Tom?
Yeah, why don't you get into that now, Steve?
Okay, so there's there's the two letters, one from Ed Bassett, and then there was one from William Casey. I think both of them, one of the primary concerns is the septic system that's out there. The Earth Restaurant has its own septic system. It's not near butters. There's no nitrate plumes that flow towards the butters. It's back in the woods. The one Ed Bassett was talking about is the septic system that was part of the tree houses. That one is close to his property. That's the one that's being monitored, but the Earth Restaurant has its own engineered septic system in the woods there. There were issues with that when they first started that system. It failed. The town notified them. We found out about it, and we went in and redesigned that system. We went back to the state and created a different type of system that's more fail-proof, if that's the right word. So what we've essentially done with that system is it has a pre-treatment system with it. And they created essentially 2 leach fields out there. So instead of 1 leach field, you have 2 leach fields. And they have a person on staff that will go out there, and I think it's weekly. They go out and the septic is pumped to 1 leach field. After a week's time, they switch the valve, shut that field off, and then the waste goes to the second field. So they're alternating the waste to the different fields. The concern is during the high usage months, like July, August, when there's a lot of people using that restaurant. That's when the system is really getting its greatest use. Spring, fall, there's not as much use out there, but it's those high peak seasons that that is the thing we as an engineer need to look at. They haven't had any issues with it. We're going out there monitoring it. They have records for that. It's been functioning well. So we're not increasing the use. Septic systems are designed for year-round use. They're not designed for seasonal use. So we're not changing the flows. We still have the same number of seats. I suspect the wintertime may even be less than what you would have in a peak season. So that's the septic system. The well, given that this is a restaurant, it has a public well. It has to meet certain standards for that well. There's one well that serves this restaurant, and it has a 300-foot protective radius around that well. If you like, I can go to the drawings. I don't know if I have the ability to share my screen, but I can kind of show you where some of these systems are if the board wants to see that.
That sounds good.
So anyway, that's the septic.
Could you just say, is it a dedicated well to the restaurant as well, or is it a shared?
Nope, it's a dedicated well to the restaurant.
Thank you.
The cottages have their own wells. Because it is a public water supply, we have to have greater standards, testing standards for that well. The state came out and approved the location and various other elements that we had to go through for that well.
Okay. And then the other question from the letters was the parking.
Yeah, so parking again shouldn't change. Right now, the way it's occupied, you have people staying, in the cottages. This is just the restaurant. They do park along the road. Employees park further out. Employees actually park on the access road, the second access road into the property. And as far as I know, they've been managing the traffic out there. I haven't been out there, so I haven't heard any complaints, but if others have, I'd be happy to hear them. And I can talk to the management on that as well. There was some comments, I think it was on Ed's about winter. And yes, with snowfall, they will have to have a more rigorous snow plowing to make sure that there is adequate space for fire trucks to get in there and parking. There's adequate places for parking. That's going to be a maintenance thing for them to coordinate. This restaurant is way back into the property. It's not out near the main road, so it'd be any problems would be an internal problem that they would have and that they have to deal with. Just trying to look, I'm looking through some of these comments, specifically Ed's. The first one was so we're not increasing the use, we're just changing it from year round or from seasonal to year round. We're not increasing the patronage, there's no changes in seats. There should be no additional traffic because we're not increasing seats. In fact, there'll probably be less because the units themselves will not be open. I'm just going through his things. I think that's it on his. And I think Mr. Casey's was very similar, primarily concerning the leach field, which I discussed that. He had some other comments in there that I don't think are applicable to this. I think that's all I have to, unless you have other questions for me.
Steve, if I can just add one thing. You're right that there'll need to be some additional maintenance in the winter, but they already keep the roads open during the winter, if I'm correct.
They do, but they do plow because of fire access. But I
Right.
think they'll have to take a little bit extra care to make sure that you got two-way traffic on them. So.
Correct.
Okay, well, I'm going to go through the board and make sure there are no more questions. So Nina, are you all set now?
Yeah, I just want to point out that the comment number 7 of Mr. Casey is really not applicable to the board. It needs to be addressed to the assessing office. We don't handle that. We don't have jurisdiction for that in terms of, assessment.
Okay, so Scott, any comments, questions at this point?
No, thank you.
Okay, Ed,
Good, thank you.
Larry,
Well, I had a couple of questions, also revolving around winter. So I'm glad to see that you're gonna make the position of the water pipes lower. But the question that comes to mind is, okay, so you've got that OxyPro 4500 vest, which is supposed to be in maintaining an active biological process. So when you insulate that vessel, you may find you have to add some heat tracing. Electric heat tracing is the simplest. Just a thought there. And then the other one is that, did I hear you right that you have alternate drain fields for this restaurant? Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so that means that there's going to be water in one, stagnant water in one, while the other one is active. So the question that comes to mind is, are you going to have to add some heat loops in those drain fields to prevent them from freezing up? Because, if you get I don't know what the frost depth is around here. It's like 4 feet or 5 feet, I guess. So, you may want to think about having some hot water heat tracing through those drain fields to make sure they function even in the cold weather. I don't know. Maybe that's already covered in some
Yeah.
specification, but this is a commercial operation. So, you might want to really think hard about heat tracing all of your piping to make sure not only that it doesn't freeze, but also to maintain the temperatures required for the active biological process to continue. It's not going to be that simple, I don't think. But I'm sure there's other examples somewhere that are successes.
Yeah, that's some good points there, Larry. I'll talk to our septic guy. This pre-treatment system it's designed for a year round, but the alternating the fields, I'll have to look into that because you do raise some good points on that.
Okay, thank you.
So I'll come back to you on that one.
And
Okay.
then the other sort of question I had was also around the snow. I know that are you going to have to make an additional snow storage area? Or, because if you're going to plow the snow and store it on the area where you're parking cars, isn't that going to be a conflict? I mean, it seems like there could be a,
Well, right now,
well, do you have an overflow parking area?
right
if
now,
it's- Go ahead.
yeah, I think they'll have to deal with the parking. Right now, when they plow, they just wing it off to the sides. It's really about just getting vehicle access in there in case there's a fire. Now they got to be more careful like they would do any other business where you got to plow to make space for parking. There is adequate land there. There is place to push the snow. And if it gets to the point where we get a good winter with a lot of snow, they'll have to get a machine in there, front end loader, and move those piles so that they can, have access for all the parking they need.
Okay. Thank you, Steve.
All right, George, do you have anything?
No.
Okay, and John?
I have one question, Steve. You mentioned that originally the pipes were buried relatively shallow because of some ledge. You now dig down 3 or 4 feet. Are you going to have to blast the ledge, or is there going to be drilling that's going to upset the abutters?
We will have to, we've anticipated that we're going to have to blast for these lines. Hammering is probably not an option unless it's in small quantities, but they budgeted for blasting for the water line. And there is a blasting permit process that they will have to go through if they come into blasting. So they have to notify the abutters. The town has a whole process for that they'll have to follow. So.
Thank you.
Okay, so I guess we're, if all of our questions are answered, I guess I'll take a motion to declare this complete.
I move that it's complete.
Okay, I'll second it.
Okay, so I'm gonna go through, I'm in favor. So Nina,
I'm in favor.
Scott,
In favor.
Ed,
In favor?
Larry.
In favor?
Okay, so you're gonna, Steve's gonna make those couple of corrections that it's conditional use, and the percentage of coverage is unchanged. And I guess there's a couple other things we're going to provide. The only thing we haven't done, George, is to declare a case manager. And since you did the last one.
I did.
Yes. So I'm nominating you again.
My pleasure to serve.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you, guys. The other thing is on the 22nd, which is the day after our next meeting, at least 3 of us have to dial in to the selectmen's meeting because they're having a public hearing on a change to the land use ordinance, which does not actually affect anything we're doing. It's about tents, but we have to, at least a quorum of our group have to be called into that meeting. So I'll remind you when we have the meeting on the 21st.
And we are all of us a little tense these days.
Yes, but anyway, I think Lisa sent you the copy of the ordinance. How long you can leave tents up. It didn't have a lot to do with the planning board, but it was in
It's only
our
for large tents, George,
Yeah.
not little tents.
Little tense. Well said, Ed. Well said.
Yes. Okay, well, so I will
Tom?
take a motion. I'm sorry, yes?
We're set for public hearing then on the 21st.
Yes, we are set for a public hearing. We'll see you then.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
Okay,
Thank you.
I will just take a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, and all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay,
All right, thank you.
thank you, guys.
Thank you.
See you in 2
Bye.
weeks.
See ya.
Bye-bye.